So today, we have Mason and Angelina, and they will both share their history experience. So I guess introduce yourselves. I don't know, you guys can give a couple fun facts about yourself. Wait, sorry, did you guys hear that?
Oh, yeah, I guess I can start. Hi, I'm Angelina. I'm a current senior at Melbourne High School. And in terms of my history or like history classes I've taken, I took world history, Excel in ninth grade, uh US 1 accelerated and AP Euro in 10th grade, US history 2 accelerated in 11th grade. And then I guess it's not really a history, but AP Econ in 12th grade. And yeah, that's really it.
Hi, I'm Mason. I'm a senior at Melbourne High School, and I've taken World History Excel, US History 1 Excel and AP Euro, A Push, um, and AP Psych and AP Comparative Government.
Oh, okay. So congrats to Mason for committing to an amazing college for history. So today I've gathered a couple of questions to ask about your experiences just studying history in and out of school, and I guess your advice for upcoming, like maybe aspiring history students. So I guess just in the beginning, what first sparked your interest in history, and what is your favorite like section of history?
Yeah, I can go first. I remember in middle school, I was much more interested in math and science, but then when I took my first two history classes in high school, it was just a lot more interesting. It was a lot more fun, doing all the readings, watching documentaries, doing writings. So that really sparked my interest in history. Um, and I would say my favorite period to study would be around the 1980s, 1990s that we studied in APUSH.
I'm less like well versed in history. Like I wouldn't say history is my favorite subject. I do enjoy like discussing history, and I guess like my favorite section would be, or I really like current events. So anything that's going on in the world right now. So I guess it's not really history, but it is a part of history.
That's great. Did you ever engage with history like outside of school? Like, did you guys ever do research, read books on your own, or watch specific documentaries about events that you were just interested in?
Yeah, I definitely did a lot of that. So I did help um I was one of the presidents of the Global Diplomacy slash Impact Club. I did some research. I also did like reading about it a little bit. Like I remember watching and reading the miniseries and book All Quiet Across the Western Front. I also a lot of the bulk of my volunteer hours was actually at the Smithsonian where I transcribed a lot of historical documents.
I guess the work I did was less so like history based, but I guess like as a debater, it's very important to be caught up with like what's currently going on in the world as well as like past tensions. So for example, like the Middle Eastern area is super unstable in terms of like global diplomacy and global tensions. And then in general, I guess like whatever pops up on my YouTube recommended in terms of like history, it's typically like more like STEM focused. Like for example, like the history of airplanes or like the history of so like such or so and so like devices or developments. But I usually watch those because those are pretty interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. I also really do like watching the history of like STEM stuff. So I guess especially since I'm a high schooler and there's probably high schoolers and middle schoolers out there who, they're taking a history class. So I guess kind of approaching your history class, how do you like I guess like read these such like dense textbooks, these like primary sources from like many like ages ago that like maybe their English isn't very modern. So how do you really like handle that?
I relied a lot on secondary sources like textbooks, the class notes, and I would use the context of that to really look into some of the words, use some context clues maybe here and there. And when there was a lot of reading to do, I used the skimming method where really the most important lines in a paragraph are the first line and the last line, which really give the main idea and the conclusion about that. And I would just do a lot of skimming in the middle.
Yeah, I totally agree with what's been said. I guess something else I do is like trying to find the main idea, like even if you can't figure out like every single thing the author is trying to say, just like the general gist, like in terms of like their feelings or emotions or like thoughts on a certain.
So I guess more into like the studying and like reading aspect, especially when you're studying for like the, these history tests, like what is your advice since, there's so many topics, so many events to study for? How do you memorize it? Like, do you create like any like acronyms, any like study tips? Like, what are your thoughts?
So for me, I didn't really have many study techniques. My memory is pretty good, so I would read the textbook, I would condense it into notes, and then I would just review the notes over and over again. But that's not really, I mean, a good way to study for exams. Like first, I would do some memorization, but then after that, it's more about concept and application to ideas. So after that, I would find multiple choice practice tests, and then also a lot of I would practice my own essay prompts because really practicing and doing tests is really much more important than memorizing in history.
My memory in history tends to be like not as good. Like I had to use a lot of different study methods to like sort of memorize stuff down because it tended to get confusing, especially if it's like a large chunk of information coming at me. So I took notes in class and then I guess in terms of studying, I made a lot of Quizlets as well as I used Anki a lot. So those are just flashcards websites, and I would practice them maybe like for an hour or two before like I take the test. Like I guess that wasn't like the most studying I've ever done, but it definitely was pretty helpful in terms of just like making sure I got everything down. And I like creating, I guess, like mnemonic devices or like easier sentences to remember like the timeline of things or just like the order that things happened in.
I guess just like a follow-up question to I guess your flashcards, like what information do you put onto these flashcards? Like are they questions or are they more like events and like you have to like describe like how do you kind of like interact and use these flashcards?
So it's mostly like events and like key questions. So, like I would put like key details on the backs of cards or like key terms on the front, key definitions or like key things on the back. But and like thematic questions or like the most important questions in the unit, I would also put down. But I guess like on top of that, I would also like quiz myself, like writing down like the stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so since I guess since we're still kind of on the topic of like I don't know, like taking like history tests, so I feel like on a lot of tests there's MCQ section and there's like free response where it's like DBQs, like image analysis. So there's just a bunch. So I see like a question in the chat. It's how to come up with ideas for history writing topics such as why is this historical event important? So I guess you can kind of explain like your process for I guess like setting up an essay, coming up with like a really strong thesis. Like how do you guys form these like paragraphs?
Yeah, so for coming up with um ideas for these writing topics, I think first I my both my English and history teachers said that you should plan a lot at the start before you write. Maybe sometimes planning can take more time than writing the whole essay. Like you would jot down all your evidence, all your ideas, and then after that, an idea for answering your question should come up after a bit of thinking. If if you're also talking about like writing topics to practice for, I mean it you could look back on past AP prompts, maybe practice some of those argument topics um before you really go and take one of the um essays in history class. For example, I remember I think the one of the A push FRQs was to what extent was the English Civil War caused by religious or like was it caused by religious or political reasons? So you can really look back on past prompts to come up with um to practice really coming up with ideas on how to answer these topics.
I also agree. I think planning is super, super, super important. I think I do a lot better when I plan things out before I actually like start writing it. In terms of like writing strong theses, I usually like to like restate the question with like my perspective of what I'm arguing, as well as like a few reasons. So usually two to three that like relate to different parts. So maybe like one reason's like about economics, or like the other reason is about politics. And then in terms of writing like why a certain historical event is important to like history or to something, I usually would like ask myself like what would happen like if this event didn't happen at all, or like what would happen to history if like this historical event didn't happen the way it did. And usually that would help me like generate ideas as to like why specifically this event is so key in history.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I guess for these essays or DBQs, what do you do if you're under like a time crunch? Like for example, you spent a long time trying to like understand the prompt and now you're here trying to write like a structure, but you just can't come up with ones and you have like, I don't know, like 30 minutes remaining. Like, what is your best advice? Would you rather write a lot with like maybe not very good evidence, or would you just rather write a short but very like dense and I guess informational paragraph?
So for there's like two I guess different like class approaches to this, like AP versus Excel or CPA. So for AP, all the essays are either DBQ or LEQ, which you can look up. There's a rubric online. And what your main objective it's not really about writing a good essay in those classes. It's much more about hitting all the points. So in that case, I would write maybe a short informational passage where you really hit all the points, like making sure you write your thesis, making sure you write your context, making sure you piece the evidence into the like the theme. Like if you have 7 documents, maybe if I have 30 minutes left, I'll just use a few of those, tie them into my theme without much analysis, um, and just try to hit the bare minimum for all those points. Or I didn't really take many like non-AP history classes, but I'm assuming for those you want to have a much uh, maybe a longer but less informational passage. Um, I did hear the U.S. History 2 teachers were actually somewhat lenient on essays. So yeah, I would just try to get like a pretty long, like somewhat informational, but not like a very short, dense paragraph amount of writing.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I guess like to avoid the situation in the first place, I'd recommend like a lot of practice, just so you don't have to like panic and freak out when that actually happens. Usually that should be like a last like like the worst case scenario and not like the first case scenario. But in terms of writing essays, um I would say like I agree with what Mason said, like strike a balance between writing something super long and super flimsy and something super short and super dense. And as someone who's taken US too, I can affirm or confirm that we don't write essays in class, or like I didn't write any essays in class. So all of them were take-home essays, and it was definitely a lot more lenient in terms of say like in terms of like what points to hit. Like as long as it was a coherent essay arguing for something, like you would get like a pretty good grade.
Yeah. So I guess I think that's pretty much it for like tests and stuff like that. So I guess we can talk about like outside of school. Like, how did you guys ever do like, I don't know, like any independent research or like I guess as you guys mentioned earlier, or Angelina said you like watching documentaries, you guys like reading like books. So like do you have any recommendation for books or documentaries or anything that's like history related in general?
Hmm. Well, I I did mention earlier that I really like this book or Netflix miniseries called All Quiet Across the Western Front. But besides that, there on YouTube, there's actually quite like an endless supply of um like great history videos, fun to watch. Like whether it's Khan Academy's Crash Course or like more silly videos like I guess oversimplified history videos like I don't know. It was always really fun to explore that. Um, but books, regarding books, I did find that a lot of my learning were from the textbooks. I thought it was pretty fun to read, look at the maps, all of that. So, yeah, it's just mainly a supply, the endless supply of history content on YouTube.
I agree. I'm a super big fan of Crash Course and Oversimplified. Usually, like when I study, I'll just watch like the related video and then do my studying, and then like to review, I'll watch the video again rather than like studying another time. Um, in terms of like books, I guess like the one book that I was told to like read or like we've read a lot of excerpts from was Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond, I'm pretty sure. That was like something that was heavily emphasized. Never read the entire thing, but if that's something you're interested in, I would say it's probably like a good read to start off with.
Yeah, I agree. Like when I'm studying for like my history exams, like I definitely use oversimplified and crash course a lot. I think oversimplified is definitely really good if you just want like just like an overview of like the events and how they lead up to each other. But I think for more specific information, I think crash course is really good. Um, so I guess we can kind of move into like the college application part. So did you highlight history, I guess, in your college application like and yeah, pretty much. And what extracurriculars did you have that were like related to history that you think made you like kind of stand out among the others?
Yeah, for me, I talked about a lot about history in my application. Um, I mean, for example, like I did the ECs mentioned before, like research, global diplomacy, volunteering, a lot of that. But in my essays, I did I did a lot of research, like for WashU, UMich, like they had pretty interesting re history programs. Like I looked into specific classes, like maybe like medical humanities, stuff like that, that were really interesting. Like I mentioned the specifics, like what class, maybe what professor taught it. Maybe I also like sometimes I talked about what the professor, some of their projects or research in history was and why I was excited to like potentially join the college and study with them. So just really um talking about why this college uh really uh like interests you and really tie yourself into that college. That really worked for me.
I'm not or I didn't major in history. I'm actually a STEM major, but I know, or like in terms of like writing essays, history was super, super, super important because a lot of colleges care a lot about like your perception of history and your perspective on like what's happened in the past. So, for example, a lot of colleges have prompts of like what's the most important issue in the world right now and how would you solve it? Or they'll ask in like interviews if you had like unlimited resources or like if you had $1 billion, like what would you do with that money? Like and I feel like that a lot of that like relates to history, like what had gone on and what is currently going on would definitely influence your answers. I think like being aware of like political tensions or like societal tensions or like communal or like what's happening in your community that like hits super close to home would be something to definitely address and could help you stand out.
I think I agree. So I guess this is kind of like personal insight part. So especially when you're studying for these like history exams, I guess especially like in AP classes, like when you have like an AP exam in May, like I guess just in general, like how did you stay motivated overall when taking these exams? There's so much stuff to like cover and like what do you do when you're feeling like overwhelmed? Like for example, like do you go outside, take a walk, or do you just spend like the whole day studying, making sure you have like everything down? And also, I guess on top of that, what was the hardest AP, I guess, history you took?
Yeah, so actually last May, I don't know, I wasn't very stressed, but what I did was I would always like every day do some review, do some practice. Like maybe I would spend a little bit of time reviewing my notes and then I would just maybe find like practice exams online and stuff. Regarding stress, I just reminded myself that it was um actually a great time because like the school year's about to end, everything's getting warmer and actually when you're taking AP exams, if your exam is in the afternoon, um the attendance office might like let you skip your morning classes and stuff. So on quite a few days you would actually get to sleep in, like get ready for your exam and stuff. So yeah, I guess just reminding yourself that it's gonna be fine. Yeah, it goes a long way. And regarding the hardest AP history exam in the past, I've really only taken AP like the AP US history and AP Euro exams because all the other exams are upcoming soon. For those, I'd say I honestly think the AP Euro exam was a bit hard because it was my one of my first introductions into AP exams, AP classes. But besides that, it was honestly fine. It was just maybe the nerves of taking the first AP exam.
I'm a little bit different. I was really stressed out when I had to take the Euro exam. I think Mason mentioned it's like one of your first like intros to like an AP. So I was really, really worried. I think I might have taken it before biology even. So it was like my first AP, like, and it was like history, and I'm like, oh no. But I think something that I definitely told myself was that like the curve was a lot nicer than what I typically get in class. So even if I don't do that well, like the curve will probably save me. In terms of studying, like I bought a notebook. It was like one of those mini notebooks, and then I like filled it up with I think for Euros, like 4 periods or 5 periods of time, and then I just like wrote everything down, and that was sort of like my review. And something to keep me going is like I really like color coding everything, so I color coded my notes, and they look super nice. Um, in terms of like how I felt during the exam, honestly, it was fine. It was more of like the waiting for my scores that was like really like nerve-wracking. But I feel like it worked out in the end, so I don't feel like there's a need to be that stressed. Like after you're done with the exam, just like let it go. There's nothing you can do. And just remember that like if you're struggling on the exam, everybody else probably is, and that's what like the curve exists like for that reason. So like don't stress about it like too much.
Yeah, I do have to talk about the curve. It's very strong for a lot of classes. Like in calculus, oftentimes a 60% can get you a 5. For AP histories, it's around like a C, like 70, maybe like 5%. It's a very strong curve for a lot of classes, so I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess two more questions left. So the last one, or sorry, the second to last one is, do you recommend using like ChatGPT or AI to like maybe like structure study? Like, do you really think it's accurate and do you use it? And if so, like why? Like, do you use it to plan out like essays? Do you use it to, I guess, study or like, do you recommend it? Yeah.
Well, personally, I never really found a reason to use it for history because all the class notes, all the textbook stuff is enough for me. But it is a good tool to use if you wanted to come up with maybe multiple choice practice questions, um like essay prompts and stuff. But I do find what the teacher prepares for, like oftentimes the teacher will give you resources to practice with, or you can just find them easily online by typing in the course name and like maybe MCQ and stuff. So I do have to say it's somewhat helpful, but what your teacher has is probably much better than ChatGPT.
I agree. Most of my history, like studying like the hardcore part came before the rise of ChatGPT, so I didn't really have a chance to really like try it out. I have like an irrational fear of using ChatGPT when it comes to history, only because there's so many like law cases where the lawyers use ChatGPT and it's like not real or like the evidence they come up with just doesn't exist, and that always scares me, especially if it's like related to history, which is something you can like definitely fact check. So I think my strategy now is like I usually use it to explain answers, or like where you know that this is the right answer, like having it explain something versus like having it just give you the answer. But even like still, I agree with Mason, and like probably going to your teacher is the best solution. But like if you have procrastinated and there's like nobody else to turn to, like ChatGPT would be okay for that. But I would like advise like against using ChatGPT to like generate content, and more of having it just like confirm whether or not like something is right or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the last question, I guess, is why does studying history matter in today's world? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I talked about this in some of my college essays, but today misinformation is kind of rampant, and I'm not going to talk about today's world really, but yeah, a lot of what's happening is built upon misinformation, and it's really important to understand the patterns that have happened in the past to really prevent them from happening again. Like maybe from World War II, we saw the rise of fascism. Um, yeah, it's important not to go back to there. In history, along with that, it actually ties into a lot of other fields, like perhaps economics. History is also a precursor to law in a lot of universities and stuff. And yeah, it like history is I'd say it's a tool that lets you understand like how humans have acted, and really there's just this cliche phrase that says uh that says like history repeats itself. It really does. I remember my world history class, Mr. Brower, he really stressed the importance of patterns, and humans they really do act the same like throughout centuries. So yeah, history is very important to prevent all these tragedies from happening again.
I agree, and I feel like even as like a person who's like who really really loves STEM, like you can't really like escape or like run away from like the history aspect of it. Like a lot of like the like I feel like governing ideas in STEM also like stem or like stem a lot from history. Like for example, like ethics in terms of like conducting experiments or things you can or cannot do when it comes to like engineering or like running your labs or like running research is something that is like rooted in history and has like influenced a lot of like how we do things like in the STEM world today. So I think it's just something to definitely be aware of because you don't want to be like caught just like not doing or not knowing something that like would definitely like bite you later.
I definitely agree. So there's a question in the chat. Do you have any suggestions for interacting with history teachers? Um,
For me, since I was planning to apply as a history major to colleges, interaction was definitely really important, especially for letters of rec, which you will need two in junior year. Preferably one from a STEM teacher and one from a humanities teacher. So for history teachers, I I asked like I think I asked one of them to help run my club, and that really helped strengthen our connection. She said she was busy, but I mean, still, like, we did get on friendlier terms. It did really help with my, I don't know, just like my enjoyment in that class. But besides that, when uh, for you can also talk to history teachers if you really want to do research. I personally didn't talk with my English teacher, but I do know he actually helped one of my underclassmen friends prepare for National History Day, a really prestigious history competition. And I think he won something like that. But yeah, just asking to be part of clubs, like doing research or finding opportunities. I think also just asking questions. Oftentimes they'll find like find they'll oftentimes be happy that you're actually like interested and engaged in the subject. So really all of those opportunities are great for interaction.
I agree, and I also just wanted to add that like all the history teachers I've had so far are all like super friendly people. Like they will not turn you down if you want to talk to them. That's just like not part of their personality. So like definitely don't be afraid to reach out. They're also super sweet. And I know that like in terms of like writing letters of rec, like a lot of my friends have asked their history teachers, especially like their English teachers for letters of rec because they're very, very good at writing good letters of rec. So that's something to keep in mind if you're interested in doing something history related or are looking for letters of rec from your teachers.
so I guess that kind of concludes today's meeting. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to like unmute and just ask now. But if not, I guess we can end it here. And thank you, Mason and Angelina, for answering all these amazing questions. Yeah, so I guess I'm assuming that there's no questions left. So I guess have a great day.